See if we can get this on. We're going to call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Everybody seated. Mr. Harris, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barber.
Present.
Ms. Byrne.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Dastra.
Here.
Ms. Elias. Mr. Feldman.
Here.
Mr. McGrann.
Here.
Ms. Rufo.
Here.
And Chairman Adams.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum.
We do.
Okay. First item will be by the agenda is public comments. Or before we get to the public comments, just announcing that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. If you would, please silence your cell phones, turn off any ringers. I am required to tell you that it is being recorded under Pennsylvania law, just so you are aware that anything you say will be recorded as part of that. For public comments, if there are any, thank you for those of you who are here. Glad to see the public attending and showing an interest. If you have any comments, when we open it up, if you would come up to the mic, please give us your name and the street on which you live. And we ask that if you could limit your comments to about 3 minutes. So are there any comments from the public? Okay, well, hearing none, we will move on. Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Minutes are usually approved by, I guess, an affirmation. So the first comment, everybody has received a copy of the minutes. Are there any corrections to be made? Hearing none. Okay, therefore, without objection, I ask without objection that the minutes be approved. Any objections? None. So ordered. Next item of business are bylaws. Officially, we are not required to have bylaws. Working with Ms. Rufo, we worked up a set that I think would be a good formality to add for the committee. You all have received copies of the bylaws. Has everybody received a copy of the bylaws or the proposed bylaws? All right. With this, I will entertain a motion to accept them, to approve them.
I can't find, I'm not sure which email the bylaws are in.
Which,
Is it a physical copy or did we get them electronically?
they were sent by email.
Does anyone happen to know the title of that email?
Would have been,
It's
Excuse me,
from
would it-
July 6th, I think, or July 3rd.
would have come from Angela Boyle.
Yes,
9:05 a.m.
and the email is titled Home Rule Study Commission Meeting, July 6, 2023.
So I apologize for not seeing that attachment. I only have a couple questions then.
Well, to interrupt first, we need a motion, and then we can debate it, discuss it as we need. Is there a motion to approve the bylaws?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Moved by Mr. McGrann, is the second?
Second.
By Mr. Barber. Discussion, debate. You, Mr. Dasher, you had issues or questions?
Yeah, and like I said, I apologize for not seeing the attachment and reviewing it. But are there any attendance requirements in the bylaws?
There are not, as my thought was, as an elected official, you are not, it wouldn't be appropriate to require a specific attendance other than to form a quorum.
Okay, because I may be wrong about this, but I believe that some other, like, I think, for example, city council does have some attendance requirements. You need to have a certain amount of, like, excused absences, but so many unexcused absences would lead to the question of whether or not they continue to serve on the body. I'm curious if anybody feels like we need to have any attendance requirements?
Mr. Feldman?
Speaking to that, I just want to say that the members of the commission were elected by the voters, and there should not be anything in our bylaws that kind of interferes with the investment of authority, I guess you could say, that the voters have given someone who is elected. So for that reason, I don't think anything should be added to the bylaws for that.
Mr. Dasher?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that notion only because it's not unprecedented. However, I can understand that. The only thing I would ask that we maybe include in the bylaws is that should a vacancy appear on our commission, we have to unanimously all agree that the person who would fill that vacancy, or rather, we all agree unanimously who fills the vacancy.
Mr. Feldman?
I believe the state law requires a majority vote.
Ms. Rufo, you?
If I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I think we did a 2/3 vote. Is that what we did? Or-
I'm trying to, now I have to go back and refresh my memory.
Oh, no, that's for amendments.
That for amendments is a 2/3 vote. I think replacing a member who resigns or has to leave the board, the commission, was a simple majority.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, my only concern with that is that because we're a nonpartisan board, I feel like if we all can't agree on somebody that we can collectively work with, it may cause either internal or external concerns. But I'm not going to push super hard on the matter. That's just how I feel.
You, if you would like, you may make a motion to amend.
I suppose I will make that motion then, to amend the bylaws, just that any vacancies being filled are a unanimous vote.
If I can just hold up, just so I can find the location. That
Article 3, Section 7.
3, Section
7.
Yeah. Article 2. So we're discussing Article 2, Section 7. It says, in the case a Home Rule Study Commissioner is not able to complete their term, the remaining members of the commission will appoint by majority vote a replacement to complete the term. There is a motion to amend majority to a unanimous vote. Do I hear a second? Okay, the motion is not seconded, so therefore it is not under consideration. Any other? Yes, Mr. McGrann.
Yeah, so I had a question about Article 2, Section 5, regarding the secretary. So Mr. Harris is our secretary, is that correct?
Yeah, at the for organizational meeting, the commission appointed Mr. Harris to be the secretary to the commission. When the approval of the bylaws, I would say that would carry over. The commission would be able to change that at any time if they would want to.
Well, I guess I support Mr. Harris serving as our secretary. My question about Article 2, Section 5 is the language where we indicate that if the vice chair vacates their term, that the secretary assumes the position of vice chair. I guess with the additional language until the commission is able to elect a new vice chair, is the intention that we would swiftly move to designate a commission member as the vice chair. Otherwise, we would have Mr. Harris as our vice chair, and as an unelected person, I'm not sure that seems appropriate.
As an explanation, I would assume that position would last on the order of minutes.
Okay.
That if that were to be the case.
Yep.
The intention was just that there would be a vice chair, sort of an acting vice chair until a new vice chair is elected.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Yes, sorry. Ms. Berg.
Yes, I was looking at the bylaws, and there's a lot of places where the decision's left up to the chair to make. And I think I saw that in 3 or 4 places where I really felt there should be some input from the commission as well, and not just the chair.
Okay, do you have a motion to amend the specifics, or is there something?
Yeah, I guess I do. Can I see your hard copy of the bylaws? Thank you. I would
Send you my
appreciate
copy
a
down, sure.
printed copy. Thank you.
Brian, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, Ms.
I
yep.
don't know if this is, I was just looking, and for an example, Article 2, Section 4, the chair appoints the parliamentarian with the approval of the commission. Is it throughout the document, I don't quite remember, but maybe you will, is that the caveat, that the chair does the appointing at the approval of the commission? Or are there places where the chair only makes the
So
decision?
as a clarification, my understanding is the way it is exactly just what you said. While the chair officially nominates a person as parliamentarian, for example, all appointments are with the majority approval of the commission.
Section 2, where at? Here.
Not having my hard copy in front of me anymore,
That's the way I felt.
that's fine.
Okay.
While we're reviewing that, I found something that I just want to ask a question about.
Yes, Mr. Dastra.
Does anyone think it could be problematic for communications to have you, Mr. Chair, be an ex officio member of all the committees? Or is that something that's like a pretty standard practice?
Mhm.
in my past experience, when a board is created, the vice chair tends to be an ex officio member of the committees. I think that's the way it's worded
Okay.
in these. It wouldn't be the chair, it'd be the vice chair, so it'd be Ms. Rufo.
It's Article 1, Section number 2,
Article 1.
for the rules of procedures in the meeting of the Lancaster City Home Rule Commission. And I think we're talking about there, if somebody's disruptive, the chair can throw them out of the meetings.
Yes.
Or unreasonably disruptive. And I know I've been to several meetings where, I could see where one person might think someone's being disruptive because they're emotional or they're showing compassion about what they're speaking. And I want to make sure that's not what we're saying, that you would be the only one that would be able to make that decision at that time.
Do you have a motion to amend?
Well, I was just getting clarity first
Okay.
about what you're saying. I'm asking,
For clarification,
yes.
the chair, whomever is acting as chair at a meeting is in control of the meeting, and as such, if somebody is disruptive, it's the chair's responsibility to try to maintain decorum, to maintain the commission or the meeting. So that, I would say that, yes, the chair holds the authority to ask somebody to leave.
And
Right.
yes, I would make a motion that would be based on the commission as a majority and not just one person's opinion of what is being disruptive or the other language that you use in here.
I would second that.
So we have a motion, just to create, let me try to come up with a language so that we would be saying that the chair, with the approval of the commission, may remove. So you would like to add the
Yes.
words with the approval of the commission.
Yes.
There's a motion and a second.
Can you clarify the article and section you're referring to?
Article 1, Section 2. If you can pass my copy back, I will tell you. Okay, so Article 1, Section 2 currently states, any person, whether a voting member or otherwise, whose behavior is unreasonably disruptive to the business of the commission may be ejected from a meeting at the discretion of the chair. Unreasonable disruptions include, but are not limited to, failing to recognize the authority of the chair and designating who has the floor to address the commission, repeatedly interrupting persons who have been given the floor by the chair, attempting to dominate discussion, activity which unduly interferes with the voting of the commission or tabulation of such votes, or attempting any type of coercion or intimidation of commission members in an effort to affect their votes. So Ms. Byrd has made a motion that's been seconded to add in the line that be ejected from a meeting at the discretion of the chair with the approval of the commission. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend?
My only concern, I understand where Darlene and Tony are coming from, I apologize for using first names. That, my only concern is that the timeliness. If someone is being particularly disruptive, I would be concerned that we would not be able to effectively resolve the situation if we have to do what we're doing right now. So that would be my comment on that.
And I would agree with the disruptive behavior. I think there's other language in there that I could see someone speaking with compassion And I've seen this happen at meetings that I attend when somebody stood up with compassion and they were asked to sit down and not ever to express themselves, and they were really displaying compassion and not really attacking anybody or anything. And I just want to make sure that's distinguished and different than, just saying, oh, they're showing compassion, I'm not going to hear that, you have to leave.
I understand again, your concerns about that. I think we have to trust our chair that he will exercise the proper authority in that case. I agree that, this is something that the chair has to maintain control of an organized meeting, a public meeting. There has to be a single point of control there, that to try to do that by committee is just not effective.
Is there,
Yeah, there's
Ms.
one.
Byrd?
Yeah, so down in section, 2, I did go one down, the same, then down.
Oh.
That the chair is the only person that can change, where do we see that?
Well, I'm sorry. Right now, there is a motion to amend Article 1, Section 2. Is there any more discussion on Article 1, Section 2?
No.
Hearing none, I will ask for a vote. Mr. Harris, would you call the roll or call for the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Barber,
No.
Ms. Byrd,
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. Dastra,
Aye.
Mr. Feldman,
No.
Mr. McGrann,
No.
and Ms. Rufo,
No.
and Chairman Adams.
No. So the vote, in the opinion of the chair, the noes have the majority. So the motion is defeated. Are there any others? Ms. Byrd, you had a comment about another?
Yeah, it was changing, the chair is the only one that can change the order of the meeting. I think I guess it's just my understanding, like Robert's Rules of Order, we should have approved the agenda and asked if there was any agenda changes and accepted the agenda prior to starting, and then we go to our bylaws where we say the chair is the only one that can change the agenda. So I think there should be some commission input somewhere along there. I don't know exactly where it goes, but I believe there needs to be some commission input.
Okay, I'm assuming that you are under Standing Rules, Article 1, Section 5. The order of business for any special meeting of the Lancaster City Home Rule Study Commission shall be determined by the chair? Or are you looking at
I think she's referring to section 3.
Section 3?
Chair
Oh,
of the commission may change the order of the business prior to any meeting.
Yeah, section 3.
Yeah, and so as a just clarification, the only thing the chair can do is change the order of the agenda, not the actual agenda. The agenda is actually, my understanding would be the agenda is required under the Sunshine Law to be posted, and that cannot be changed without the commission doing so. All this says is that the chair may change the order.
Okay. All right, so, and just for my clarity moving forward, when you send out an email to the commission asking if we had agenda items, that's when that would be made?
Yes.
If there was a suggestion of a change, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go.
If there was a suggestion of a change, that's when that should happen. So we would get a copy of the agenda prior, and then you would ask us, is there anything that we would like to add before that's accepted and posted?
Yeah, before any meeting, any member of the commission may request to have items put on the agenda.
Okay, all right. I'm I'm okay with that then.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. Unless somebody else calls the vote, I would ask that we vote on the bylaws. Mr. Harris?
Mr. Barber,
Yes.
sorry, Ms. Byrd,
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Dastra,
Aye.
Mr. Feldman,
Yes.
Mr. McGrann,
Yes.
Ms. Ruffo,
Yes.
and Chairman Adams.
Yes. So in the opinion of the chair, it passes unanimously. So we've adopted a set of bylaws that will be what we will follow for our term as the commission, the Home Rule Commission. With this, there's actually an item if I have approval of the commission that I think needs to be considered as part of the bylaws before we move on with the agenda, is the bylaws require us to officially appoint a parliamentarian. The chair appoints the parliamentarian with the approval of the commission. And I would like to appoint the solicitor, Mr. Hamburger, as the parliamentarian for the commission.
Could you explain what a parliamentarian is?
The role of the parliamentarian really has two positions. One is that they are the reference effectively that the meetings and that the commission is being held under the bylaws and under following Robert's Rules of Order. Normally, while Robert's rules would say that the chair consults with the parliamentarian about procedure, I would argue that extends to anybody would be able to request the parliamentarian on an issue of business, whether they are following proper protocols. The only other position of the parliamentarian is that if there is a motion in which the chair normally does not enter debate of a motion. So it is the parliamentarian, at the request of the chair or at the request of the commission, could ask the parliamentarian to preside over a motion until the motion is decided. Any?
Question, oh.
Yes,
So to that point, the purpose of turning it over would be to give the chair the opportunity to engage in discussion.
Yes.
Right.
Mr. Dasher?
I'll second appointing Barry Hamburger as our parliamentarian.
Okay. I would ask for unanimous consent. Is there any objection to the appointment of the parliamentarian? None heard? Thank you. And either thank you or thank you, and hopefully,
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm going to say thank you, but thank you.
well, but I actually apologize that I don't think I actually asked if you wanted to be the parliamentarian. Some of us have greatness thrust upon them. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Pennsylvania Economy League. So, Mr. Cross, sir.
Sir,
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, you got to.
Red light.
well, we did send
I don't think it's on.
water.
For the folks at home.
Oh, there it is. There it is. It's hard to see. Anyway, I guess the formality is to introduce ourselves again, since we met a month ago. We're learning each other's personalities, but we'll start with our names. So my name is Gerald Cross. I'm with the Pennsylvania Economy League. With me is Fred Reddick, and Patty Moorhead. So we'll be your main staff, and we'll be happy to work with you at every step of the way. Now, I did send a revised presentation and an email yesterday, I believe it was. We made some changes on our slides that had been distributed, so I'd ask you to follow along with that email if you have it. Patty's going to present it on the screen. And the first slide, or I should say the second slide, the presentation is kind of designed for you to understand how we see your role. Obviously, this is staff talking to the commission, but from our experience and from the law itself, we'd like to just discuss how we see the different parts of the process that you'll be undergoing. And obviously, the first two of these bullet points have been met. The voters did their job. The election was held, and that started your clock on the certification of the election. I'm not sure when the county certified the election, but I assume it was at the end of May or thereabouts. I don't know what day you're officially started, so.
I think it was officially June the,
Oh, was it as late as June?
June the 5th.
It was that late? Okay. Well, it was a later primary this year, that's right. So that did start your 9-month clock, and that's why that's highlighted. You are obviously, and you were well aware of this, you have 9 months to complete the study phase. And I think the study phase is exactly as it is. It says study, and that is your job. No one expected you to come in fully formed, fully informed or fully informed as to your role or as to your knowledge of local government, because the home rule law, as set forth in the Constitution, or at least the idea of home rule charter, was that local elected citizens would study and examine the forms of government that the legislature gave you to work with to develop local government services for you. And you would study whether or not, in their wisdom, the legislature gave you something you could work with, or whether or not, in local wisdom, you needed to change and make it work for you. That was enacted by law by 1972. So by 1972, all the prior forms of government were frozen, and Lancaster was frozen. I guess Bernie said 63, you had a charter commission here. So, or 62, whatever it was under 1957 law. So anything changes after that has to go through this process. And that was the effect. So that's where we are today. But I want to emphasize to you that it is a study period. You are not to make preconceived notions of whether or not it's efficient or effective until you've looked at it. Very much like the first day of school, you'll be taking a test, a self-administered test. At the end of your 9 months, you'll be making a recommendation, and it'll all be based on the effort you put in, your staff puts in, and the availability of an open-mindedness look at the city's structure in Lancaster today, and how that provides the citizens both input and output. The city obviously impacts everybody's lives every day, whether some people say local government is the most impactful form of government, and citizens also have to have a way to input to affect how they're being governed and services provided. If you do make a choice to say the legislature has an outmoded model, and perhaps we want to draft a charter, we've heard enough, we've examined other forms of government, we've looked at other municipalities, then you would put this to a vote of the commission. That's really, as I think Solicitor was very true when he said, that's really one vote you make. Everything else is study and learning up until that point. And you'll make that one vote to recommend a charter, recommend no change, or recommend no change with the recommendation of the city should revise some operations. And that's really what the act gives you. The 1972 Act then allows you to provide for a transition period, so there's an uninterrupted transition of government for the citizens and implementation. So really, that's what the Local Government Act in 72 provides and requires of you, an honest effort at study, and we're here to help you do that. Fred will talk about the duties of the commission and also the current organization of the city.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cross. Again, my name is Fred Reddick, a member of the PEL staff, and we're going to look at slide number 3, talk a little bit about the duties of the commission. The first step that you're going to undertake is to study, to review, to analyze, and evaluate city government. The process is not intended to be an inquisition. It's not intended to point fingers. is to look at the different offices that exist within city government to determine how they are working. Are they working efficiently? Are they effective in meeting the needs of the residents of the city? It's to undertake a very in-depth review of city operations, its structure, and the limitations that exist under the current government structure. Again, the optional charter provisions of the third-class city code that provide, right now, that provide for a council-mayor structure. I want to reference Dillon's Law for a moment because that is an important concept. Dillon's Law only provides powers that are expressly granted by the legislature to local governments. Local governments are a creature of the state, and you're only allowed to do what the legislature has authorized you to do. Home rule upends that process. Home rule gives you options that do not exist under the various municipal codes, under the optional charter provisions that you operate under. The process will involve interviewing various city officials, both elected and key appointed officials, looking at how the different offices interact back and forth with each other. Again, is there an effective relationship that exists? Is there a duplication of service that exists? Can things be made more efficient? The second step of the process is to take a look at other municipalities, both home rule municipalities in the state, and there are roughly 75 or so around the state, home rule municipalities that currently exist of all sizes. And also to look at other municipalities that are comparable in size that Lancaster is, not necessarily home rule, but that are similar in size and structure. There are three basic structures of local government that exist. You have a mayor-council structure, you have a council-manager structure, you have a commission structure. Those are the three basic structures that you have to look at. However, what home rule will allow you to do is to look at variations of those different structures, of the different positions that are in those structures, and again, looking at how you can form a government that would best meet the needs of the city. Does the current form, the optional charter provisions, best meet the needs, or is there another option that you can look at? And a review of other home rule municipalities and other communities similar in size will give you that opportunity, that outside perspective of what is happening around the state. Ultimately, at the end of the 9-month period, you'll make a determination of whether the current form of government does meet the needs of the city or whether it can be improved upon through a home rule charter. And as Mr. Cross said, that is the key vote that is part of the study process. That is the one vote that you will take at the end of the 9 months or prior to the end of the 9 months on whether to retain the optional charter provisions or whether to move to the next step, and that is drafting a home rule charter. Now, slide 4 provides the organizational chart that currently exists under the optional charter provisions, which are referred to as Plan A in the statute, the mayor-council form of government. You have 4 elected offices right now. You have a city treasurer, you have a city controller, you have a city mayor, and then you have members of city council. Those are the elected offices that currently exist. And then you have the different departments. Currently, there are 6 departments that exist within city government. You'll take a look. You'll want to study in depth the relationship between those offices. And again, it's the office that we're looking at, not necessarily the individual, but the offices that exist currently. to see how they interact with each other and whether there can be improvements made that would improve the delivery of services to the residents of the city. You have a lot of homework to do. You know, I know between the documents that your solicitor has provided to you and the documents that we have provided to you, we provided you with a lot of background material to take a look at. You have the organizational chart, you have the third-class city optional charter provisions, you have the third-class city code itself, you have the city's budget. There are a number of documents that you have to begin your homework assignment, if you will, and certainly those are issues as you review that material that you'll want to take a look at, and we're glad to answer any questions that may come up as part of that review process. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Cross to go over the home rule basics.
Fred's covered a lot of this slide with his explanation of Dillon's rule, and that's an overriding rule for the city today. It only is able to do things that the legislature allows. And really, this slide is pretty, it's fundamental. And the point of this slide is to guide your study. When you are looking at what is provided by the legislature, the enacting legislation for the city, the third class, the charter, keep in the back of your mind what you can do and not change, what you can change and not change. In my experience with municipal government study commissions, a lot of times people come in with items that are not the purview of the government. The government really, the organizational change won't change that no matter what form of government you're under. And you have to get away from that idea that anything that you see as a problem could be fixed by a government reform. So you really need to look at the way the government is being operated today and understand that under home rule, there are certain things you can change. There are operational things, there are administrative things, there's power flow, there's elected offices that you can change. But the things that you can't change will be things that the city doesn't have an impact on or what the legislature preempts. And that'll be the next slide. So as a guide to your thinking of when you look at what's being done today, how would that differ under home rule? I'll argue that more often than not, you'll find that it might not change under home rule, but it might be more effectively administered by a change of how it's provided. Now, the reasons for home rule, that's slide number 6. You might find in general a lot of these reasons for home rule using residual powers to write your own administrative code. Doing things like giving the citizens more access, initiative and referendum, which isn't allowed easily under the charter code. Some of the other things, accountability, responsiveness, fiscal controls, flexibility, a leadership that's focused, you may already find that the city has these. The city has these in enough quantity that the citizens' services aren't being jeopardized. So when you're looking at things, you may find that they're already present in the city. And if they are, you may want to consider what is of the charter that the city's current charter provides, city's current structure, so we don't confuse the two charter terms. What in the city's present structure is working, and what is providing that, and what lines of authority and what lines of service provision to citizens is actually working. Not everything is broken in local government. It actually works to a certain extent. When you find something that is working, but is unique in a sense to the Lancaster experience, it's evolved in Lancaster, whether it's an office created by ordinance or it's a procedure created uniquely to Lancaster that isn't necessarily the charter, but it was created because they were allowed to do it. You weren't prohibited from doing it. And that's working. You may want to consider reinforcing that into a charter, institutionalizing that into the city government. Because unless I'm wrong, every ordinance can be undone by another ordinance. So over time, even if something is working, bad intentions or misguided intentions could change things. Some things you may want to institutionalize. So think of things when you view them, is it working? If it's working, is it guaranteed to stay here and stay working? Okay, so those are the little things that you have. I'll go back to the citizen access, though, for just a real quick comment. Many home rule charters that you review, you'll see recall, you'll see elected official recall. That's no longer provided for. I believe it's been ruled unconstitutional. In the early days of home rule, a lot of charters did the Oregon model, where you can recall an official if they're just not, if they're not acting up to par. So a lot of charters weren't changed to reflect that, simply because it's a cumbersome process to change a charter. And it was the court's ruled it was invalid, so it's invalid. So when you come across something like that, all that you have left is the initiative and referendum, which is citizens' initiative to drive policy through ordinances, or the citizens' referendum to approve a change in policy or an enactment of a policy. And there's processes and that give the citizens empowerment, but you will not have the ability to recall elected officials. So you may find that a confusing part when you're reviewing current, older charters. Fred? Oh, Pat.
Under the flexibility, sorry. Under flexibility, it does remove the tax caps that are imposed on third-class cities. Earned income tax is currently capped at half a percent. It's 1%. Half goes to the school district, half goes to the city. Your millage limit at 30 can be raised or lowered, but what that gives you the ability to do is pick the taxes that work best for the city of Lancaster, is what, we know a lot of people like to raise the income tax slightly. It comes out of your paycheck once every time you get paid, versus a big hit to your real estate taxes. That's some of the flexibility it gives you. So.
I have a question. Can you go back to what you said, the statement about millage? It can be changed or it cannot be changed?
It can be raised.
Okay.
You're not limited to the provisions of the third-class city code right now.
It provides you with, it's fiscal flexibility.
Yeah.
Which you're thinking when you review the city's budget, and we'll help you with the review, or you can study prior studies, you'll see the distribution of income that the city gets. And clearly, the resources the city has to work with is what it gets. It can't print money. So the way you put the burden to fund your budget on the citizens is a function of home rule. You decide how you want to get resources to fund your budget. Currently, the state says, cities can only have 30 mills, right? 25 and then another 5. The cities, so because in the past, property was viewed as a source of wealth, it's still considered that way, I think, in local government. So you have ability to tax a certain amount, but we still limit it, so it's not confiscatory. Income tax is another, you'll see that's either your second biggest revenue producer in a city, it may be the first producer in your suburban townships, it might be the biggest source of income. That is also capped by the legislature, and the legislature said because public education is a public good, we're going to take half of the local citizens' income and put it in the school. That was a decision by the legislature that the city must follow. That's a restraint on your budgeting ability. So home rule gives you the flexibility for you to decide the level of taxation for property, earned income. Another measure of wealth is transfer of properties, real estate transfer tax. That's another flexible tax rate that home rule municipalities have versus the limit of the legislature of 1% shared with the school district. The third is a local services tax, which gets a little hairy, and it's not very flexible by design. So even though you have control over it by home rule, there's not a lot you can do with it. But that's the flexibility of fiscal sources that you get with home rule. And I know that was a lot of discussion leading up to it, but the logic behind it is citizens should be able to decide how, when, where, and how much I pay for the services I get, and I should be able to decide the level of services I get through my elected officials. And that's essentially flexibility.
I have a question actually about the local services tax. So I was reading through chapter 29, and I saw that resident is not just defined as a person living in the city, but as someone engaging in business for profit. And I know that one of the conundrums with any changes to local services tax is that you can't change tax rates for residents outside the city. Have you ever seen of a home rule charter try to incorporate businesses more directly in local services tax? I couldn't find law to clarify that.
Local services tax is just recently changed. It was back in 2006, I guess, or, I was with Pittsburgh. It might have been 14, I don't remember. The point is, though, home rule, and that's the next slide, which Fred is going to get into, in restrictions. There's certain restrictions you cannot do. It's Super Dillon's rule. The legislature in the home rule law said you do not have the ability to tax non-residents at a rate higher than we allow you to. And that's essentially taxation with representation. If they're not able to be represented by that government generally speaking can't tax them. There are exceptions. The legislature made those exceptions, okay? But generally speaking, a home rule municipality cannot offload its burden to non-residents, because who wouldn't want to?
Sure, no, and I understand that, but what I'm asking more about specifically is, like, the law here is literally telling me that someone who's just engaging in business for profit in the city.
Which tax is that, Mr. Dutch?
This is Chapter 29, Subchapter A, preliminary provisions under
Local
debt.
services.
I think he's talking earned.
I think
I
so.
believe you're
It's
talking
earned
earned income tax.
Not local services tax, earned income?
No, I'm talking local services.
Okay, local services tax, you cannot raise the rate on non-residents that are employed in the city.
Right,
Right.
but what I'm saying is that the businesses that employ them, based off what I'm reading, are considered residents under the law.
So they're subject to the law and they have to pay, they have to
Well,
remove the payroll.
Yeah, the business itself is not subject to the local services tax. It's the individual that is subject to the local services tax. The business is subject to the earned income tax, however. On net profits, it's actually referred to as the earned income and net profits tax.
Okay.
Schedule C, rental income. But the businesses are also required to collect the local, and remit the local services tax. You can't change that.
Okay, so, because I guess what I was trying to get at is that I know that someone who works in a municipality pays that local services tax, but I don't know if state law prevents that from being flipped, where the business would be responsible per employee.
It's an employment tax.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the question, but the local services tax is levied on individuals working within a municipality irrespective of where their residence is.
Right.
If they work in the municipality, they're subject to the local services tax. It is collected by the employer and then remitted back to the municipality.
Right, and like, I'm understanding all that, and I maybe I'm asking a question that might not necessarily get an answer now, and that's fine, because like,
Part of the study.
I was trying to find law based on the local services tax, so I could come here with less of a question for you, but do you know if the law that defines local services tax, do you know if it prevents that dynamic from being flipped, where instead of each employee is responsible for the tax, which is, the business would remit that to the municipality, instead of each employee paying that, the business is responsible themselves for each employee they have?
Again, I'm not sure I'm fully understanding the question, but the tax is levied on the employee.
Right.
They are responsible to pay it. It is deducted typically from their paycheck. You'll see that on an annual basis, or it may be prorated over the course of the year.
Can I interject? I think what he's asking is if instead of having the employees that work for the business that's in the city pay that tax, that the business pay the tax only for the employees who work in the city, not for the I don't know. Anyway,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think, Mr. Dastor, what you're proposing is a tax that doesn't exist under Pennsylvania law currently. So that's not something you're going to be able to govern in the charter. The tax as defined is, as the Economy League gentlemen have described it, your flexibility under home rule is on caps and amounts that can be charged on those types of taxes. The Dillon's rule concept that the Economy League has been posing is you're not given the authority to create a new tax that unless there's something that comes out of the legislature that would ultimately give that to you. So what you're actually, when you say flipping it, you're actually saying I want to tax the company what I would have been taxing the individuals. And that's a new tax. That's not something you can do. And to the extent that you are then saying I'm taxing the company, that's a company, the tax that you're authorized to deal with on the companies is the earned income tax, which has already been established.
And
Okay.
you'll see that in the next slide. Barry brings up a really good point. The next slide will show you. It's called subjects to taxation.
Okay.
One of the things you can't fiddle with.
Okay, yeah, I'll leave the conversation. The only thing I'll ask is, because I appreciate you saying, Mr. Hamburger, like, as defined, would it be possible just to send us a link to the state laws related to local services tax, just so I could read through it
There is
myself?
an excellent manual online by DCD in their library called Taxation Manual. That is the best. I don't think it's as dated as it could be, or updated as it could be, but it's great. That will give you all the categories of local government taxation, the law behind them, how they've been used, and also there's a handy dandy at the end of it, every type of government, what kind of tax they can levy, from counties to first-class school districts down to second-class townships.
Okay,
It's called Taxation Manual, and we can provide you with a link or the electronic copy of it.
a link would be perfect for me, at least.
It's fabulous.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just to build on some of the comments that you were discussing and talking a little bit about what home rule does not allow you to do. You know, we've talked a good bit about the flexibility that home rule provides in designing a government that is effective and efficient. I'm going to close our presentation by talking a little bit about some of the limitations that do exist under home rule. One, you're limited by both the United States and Pennsylvania constitutions. Secondly, there are a number of statutes that have been enacted in Pennsylvania that are what are referred to as applicable uniformly across the Commonwealth. They include certain labor relations statutes, Act 195 and Act 111. And 195 is for non-uniformed employees. Act 111 is for police and fire. They are applicable across the state. They cannot be impacted by home rule. Boundary change is another one. Election code, the Pennsylvania Election Code, again, with uniform applicability. The State Ethics Act. Now, subjects of taxation, and let me talk just a couple moments about that because that was to the heart of your question, I think, Mr. Dastra. You do have flexibility in home rule on rates of taxation that exist. However, as Mr. Hamburger stated, you cannot levy a tax that is not otherwise authorized by the state legislature for municipal governments to enact. So you're limited that way. You're also limited with respect to taxing non-residents. You can adjust the earned income tax on residents, but you're not able to adjust the rate on non-residents. And that has been litigated. There's court cases on that. I know a couple weeks ago you had a very productive informational session on the Sunshine and Open Records Act that Mr. Hamburger convened. Again, those are statutes that are uniform in applicability. Some of the environmental acts, the Sewage Facilities Act, Act 537 of 1966, dealing with sewage and the management of sewage within the municipality. Likewise, the Stormwater Management Act, Act 167 of 1978, dealing with stormwater, again, is applicable across the Commonwealth. The eminent domain statute, and finally, the municipality's planning code, which addresses zoning, subdivision, comprehensive plan, and related planning-related documents, is a statute of general applicability. So those statutes are basically off limits in terms of home rule. So wanted just to talk a little bit about what some of those limitations are. And with that, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present. We're glad to answer any questions that anyone may have further.
Yeah, are there any questions from the commission, Mr. McGran?
Do we have, I think I read somewhere addressing this before, but since it wasn't part of the list that you just provided, is there any discretion with regard to the building code and giving us flexibility with our historical structures?
The statewide building code is applicable, again, that's a law of general application across the state. That was a very difficult statute to ultimately get enacted, but it has been in place now for probably a dozen or so years, I believe, and that is would likewise be off limits.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions on this part? Mr. Dasher?
Thank you. So I do understand no new taxes. But could we, for example, institutionalize fees?
Yeah, fees are within the purview of the local government to do.
Okay.
You have that ability now, and you would have that in the future. Now, I would put this caveat on it, and I've experienced, again, some litigation on this issue. Fees need to be representative of the cost of whatever the service is that relates to those fees. So you can't have a fee that is exorbitant in nature in terms of the cost of whatever service is being provided by that fee.
Sure, so like a $15 plastic bag fee or something like that?
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But fees are something
Be a
that,
streetlight fee somewhere.
Yeah, you can't have a profit center fee.
right.
Okay. I remember some municipality imposed a streetlight fee that if the light in front of your house was working, you got assessed a certain amount every year. I don't think that's, what you're saying is that's not allowed.
Well,
Because people were going out and shooting out the
streetlight assessments are allowed.
Oh, they are?
They are. You cannot charge somebody in a certain section of town more for their streetlight than in another section of town.
So
Okay,
if- so
that's
if-
uniformity of taxation.
If I may, there's a couple things that are going to come up as you go through the study process. And again, the consultants and I'll provide assistance where we can. But there are different things that you're going to notice even as you start doing the study that the consultants have asked, which is, at their request, we sent you the optional charter and third-class city code. When you start reviewing the third-class city code, in there, you're going to see a couple of things that pop up. One are fees and the other is assessments, and they are different legally. And they're created differently, and they have different purposes, and there's different laws related to them. As it relates to the charter, even if something is not prohibited, you still can only do what's authorized by applicable law. And sometimes that applicable law isn't necessarily in a statute. It's been determined by court cases, by the Supreme Court, the Superior Court, the Commonwealth Court. And so there's a lot of nuance to some of those things. With fees, it's actually two parts to a fee. So is it reasonable? And there is open litigation about what the service is for. So it theoretically has to be rationally related to the service that's being provided. There's ongoing litigation regarding fees almost regularly. There's current cases pending before the Supreme Court that deal with fees, and we're all waiting to see how they flesh out. But the concept of fees is the municipality is always limited. They can't be a profit center. They can only be a cost recovery, and that we can't change through the charter.
So I do understand it can't be a profit center. So I guess what I'm thinking right now is that what if the intention of a fee was to, like, when you pay a stormwater fee, the idea is that you have to offset the stormwater costs associated with all the impervious surface. So could fees be utilized as a means of providing a solution to a perceived problem?
Again, fees are really, they're legislative in nature, so they have to be supported by legislation. In other words, the municipality has to adopt legislation that creates the fee. And then two, they have to relate to the service that's actually being provided. So fees are always a topic of discussion. The only thing that you're dealing with in charter is, you can limit the municipality. In other words, you're setting up the form of government, correct? What you're going to be doing is establishing the pattern or the policy and procedures by which whatever form of government you elect will be able to adopt and incorporate fees going forward. So you might, and I'm using examples, but you might, by a charter, you could say, we're not going to allow the municipality to charge, and I'll use an example. I won't use stormwater because we've got to deal with that, but we're not going to authorize them to charge a fee for application to use a public facility. Okay, so for example, right now, municipalities, many of them charge for, Long's Park, for example. If you want to rent a pavilion for your exclusive use, you have to pay a fee. You could, by charter, say that can't happen, right? You can't. You could. I would caution, and again, I think let's go through the study phase. I would caution at the outset, without seeing a devil in the details, right?
Sure.
About trying to institutionalize that we shall have a fee, because what you're then doing is putting a creation on that stays, that doesn't leave for flexibility as time. One of the issues, the reason you're here today, obviously, is that the form of government and statute that was adopted in 1958 and has been applied here in the city since 1963, and here we are in 2023 saying, hey, the administration said, we think there may be reasons to get away from the structure that was created. Okay, so that's a 60-year, almost 70 from the time the statute's adopted, time, and times have changed, methodologies have changed, the city has changed. So these are all the things you're going to be thinking about, and I appreciate, you're having good thought. I encourage the thought and the study. And then to focus a little bit on the specifics, because you could get yourself, I could sit here and chase my tail for the next, 165 days with ideas of things we could do to raise revenue, and then or to change X, Y, and Z. Each one of those will be a question of law and procedure as we move forward. But in terms of fees, yeah, it's really about, you can limit them easily and say we won't charge them, but when you do that, you are limiting your elected form of government for operations in the future. So those are the things you are going to be weighing as a commission, is what's best for the city if you determine you're going to adopt a new charter.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just a little concerned we're getting the cart in front of the horse here a little bit. I don't want to jump into, can we do this, can we not do this, until we haven't even decided what we're going to do. So I'm happy with the discourse. I don't want to hinder anything, but I just want to try to maintain, try to stay on topic. We don't move too far afield in talking about specifics, and I don't want anybody to think I want to tax streetlights. So, but did you have a? I would like to say something about Ms. Bird.
Yes, could you talk a little bit about the separate legislative and executive functions?
Yeah, I talked about the three basic structures of local government.
Oh, okay, that's what you meant there. You talked about that earlier.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. And how about the merit hiring and advancement?
Merit, you have, again, civil service statute is applicable across the board.
She's talking about the advantages of home rule. You could, and Fred's right, civil service is here applicable and the city is subject to it. But you could also have in a charter a statement of the citizens that we want hirings to be under a merit-based system. And it would be up to the council, governing body, executive, whatever is defined to ensure that hiring is done on a merit basis. Now, that is a option that you could put in the charter to ensure effective government. And that would require the legislation to be done to do that. But the goal would be, we want a merit-based hiring system. And however that's defined by the legislation that's passed and approved by the governing body. But you would essentially saying, we want one, you can't not have one.
Ms. Ruva, you had a question?
I'm curious about timeline, and if you have, maybe you sent it to us, I haven't looked at my email, but like what a path forward is for studying and some sort of goals to meet in the next several months. I mean, I'm asking this because right now we only have one meeting a month scheduled, and considering you're giving us homework, we can all talk to you individually, right? But then we have to come together and have a conversation. So having some suggested timeline with would be super helpful,
Yeah.
so that we could decide when or if I think we need more meetings.
No, that's an excellent question, although I'm going to punt that back to the chair, because that is an agenda item, and we do have a work schedule that we provided, and I think that's going to be discussed under number 8 of
Yes,
the agenda.
Yeah, if you look on the agenda. Oh,
Clearly, I
okay.
didn't read my email.
That's fine. It's under item 8. So yes, and we do have okay. Are there any questions on part 6 on 5 on the presentation?
Thank you.
Okay, none? Thank you very much. We're moving on, item 6, the issue of, and I'm assuming you are all, as we've discussed, you're all involved in all of this. I'm not saying, no, you can go home. I'll block the door. Yep. So item 6 is how we should relate public relations and public involvement. The commission will need to make a decision on, who speaks for the commission. We do not have a press secretary. Now, just as my first thought on this item is, any one of us may speak with anybody at any time, but I think as the commission, it should be understood that we are speaking for ourselves and not for the commission. With that, I'm open to any ideas on how do we approach a more formal commission response in dealing with the press, for example. So, I fully expect the press is here, and I expect them to be here every time I would hope they would be here every time we meet. I am open to recommendations, suggestions from PEL, how it's been done in the past, how other municipalities have handled this. Do we appoint one? Should it be the chair? Should it be somebody appointed? Is there some formal way of this is usually done?
I would make a recommendation that Amy Ruoff would be our speaker from the commission. Amy Rufo.
I knew what you meant, Darlene. I guess, thank you for that. Can I have a question about that, or do we have to do something formal with?
Right now, well, there's a recommendation. We can discuss the idea and have a motion to officially appoint somebody. I don't know if it's necessary, but I would like to have a contact person.
May I, Mr. Chair?
And so the recommendation is that Ms. Rufo, as you as vice chair and as just somebody who's good at it, I hope.
So just logistically from the Sunshine Law, say I'm the PR contact, the press contacts me to get some information. Am I able to say to the whole commission by email, is this appropriate to say? Or is that a deliberation and therefore outside of the Sunshine Law?
What I would be recommending as your counsel is that you not make that, but you say to the press who's asking the question, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question without bringing it up at a vote at a meeting. I think the concept that's being discussed here really is if the press had questions, for example, to they weren't here or they wanted follow-up for something that they didn't see, can you talk to them about actions the commission actually took? I think that's appropriate.
Okay.
And that's really because in all honesty, I can't imagine much, if any, of your work that's not going to be done, whether it's in this room or some other room at some other point, whether it's with this group as a whole or with committees that you might ultimately choose during your study process, that won't be done publicly. I think the real question is, if the press isn't there, can they ask questions? The press, after each of these meetings, is certainly free to talk with each one of you individually and get your own input on the meetings. I think what the chair is asking for here is really that single point of contact for something that, is this item going to be included on next month's agenda? They weren't here. That's the type of inquiry I think we're talking about.
Okay,
Yes,
great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I?
sure. Do you want to make a motion or that we appoint her?
No,
Or
actually.
you wanted something to say?
Yeah, it's a mistake.
Okay.
Actually, so I think, just by logical sequence, obviously, all of us, we have our own opinions, and so we can obviously speak for ourselves on matters, but I think with Mr. Harris being our secretary, that should be the logical point of contact for the press to contact about matters of fact. Mr. Harris keeps the record for us, and so I think that it just makes sense to ask him those sorts of questions when it's about the matters of the whole commission.
And I would just say that I think the public, we're trying to reach the public would rather hear that coming from a commissioner that they elected rather than the Secretary of Council. We're trying to reach them to get them to support whatever decision we're going to make. And if we're looking at connecting with the public, it should be one of us.
Mr. Feldman?
I don't really have a strong feeling on this either way, other than to say that I just don't really see this as necessary.
That you don't see it as necessary to have a point person? Is that?
Well, no, you're the chair, so I just assume you're the point person.
And that's fine with me. But I have no problem with somebody else taking that position either. I do think that it would be limited, but I think it would be good to have a single point of contact for just as was pointed out. If somebody has a question of what happened or what was being discussed. And as I agree, I don't disagree. It doesn't matter if it's me or somebody else. I think Ms. Rufo would be fine as that person. I am fine to tell anybody that you should talk to her as well. So,
Well, I could make a motion.
so there is a motion to
Yes, I'm gonna
appoint
make a motion to appoint, yes,
Amy Rufo as a contact person for the commission. So,
Yeah.
I'm saying that this would be somebody who would effectively be speaking for the commission.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there a second by Mr. McGrann? Any discussion? Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Harris, would you poll the commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barber.
Aye. Aye.
Ms. Byrd?
Aye.
Mrs. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. Dastra?
No.
Mr. Feldman?
Aye.
Mr. McGround?
Aye.
Ms. Rufo?
No. But I will do it.
And Chairman Adams?
Aye. So, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We all, I think all, as an interpretation, all we're saying is that if there is any specific questions for the commission, that we ask that they be addressed to the vice chair for the response. With that, I do not interpret this as in any way that we are, muting any of us.
Right.
Any of us may speak at any time with anybody, but also I would say to any members of the public and to the press that as such, any one of us is speaking for ourselves individually, and not making a statement on the plans or the process for the commission. And Ms. Rufo, you may still speak for yourself as well. But all we're saying is we ask that that's any sort of discussion like that or questions that go through the vice chair. Yes, Mr.
Can I ask to talk about, or just ask a question to you, that I think falls under the umbrella of this? Like, do you imagine us, sort of identifying a group of people, whether it's, I get people who we want to be purposeful about engaging with to get their prior experience and their comments. I'm thinking about, city elected officials, prior state level elected officials, and having a clearly defined plan to approach that rather than, I think I'm assuming that we've all been recipients of an email from Representative Sturla asking, offering to make himself available to talk to us, asking if we would like to do that. I appreciate his interest. I'm not sure that it's wise use of all of our time for all 9 of us to take him up on that invitation. I think we certainly could if we all wanted to. We have our own, but do we want to, as we go, do we want to identify, some priorities there and be organized about that, or do we want to leave it, to sort of a little more to chance?
I think you're kind of looking at two different parts. One is, as a commission, would we and how would we go about inviting people to come to just talk to the commission? I would fully expect at some point we would have current people from city government come and speak to us. I think that'd be very important, be able to ask the mayor questions, ask city council questions. That's an official capacity as the commission engaging with them. We would be asking them to come to us. As for the issue of, for example, Representative Sturla, good use of all of our time, good use of his time. Well, his time is up to him. But I would argue that he is another member of the public. While he has influence in Harrisburg, if he would like to speak with each of us individually, it'd be no different than my next door neighbor coming in and calling each of us up and say, I'd like to meet with you individually. And at the same time, each one of us has the perfect right to say, I just would not feel comfortable with that, or I would prefer not to. There's nothing that says you would have to. That's my interpretation.
So I'm looking at this
Yes.
work plan schedule, which I don't know if the members, if the public can see this, but there is a activity schedule and PEL has suggested we interview city elected officials and other department heads in July and August. So again, I think that speaks to defining some other meeting dates at some point.
And
Which would be, I think, step 8 in the, item 8 in the agenda.
for
Yep.
Sorry.
Item 7.
No problem, Ms. Berg.
For public involvement, I would make suggestions that we think about organizations that we would want to discuss information or that we want to ask to attend some of these meetings. I think it's very important that we invite the public to come. If we know there's certain things we're talking about, we should have a list of organizations or people that we want to be here as we're discussing. I mean, as you can see, there's not many people here, but we're supposed to get the public involved. So I think it would be helpful if we came up with list of people and whether it's discussing with the city or talking to the mayor, maybe to encourage them to come, which might help us on how we're setting our meetings. Because if we're having these meetings and we're not having public input, then that means we need to have a meeting to have public input. Whereas if we think ahead of the game and invite these people to come to these meetings while we're talking to the city council and the government, we know that we're engaging the public. So I would think that we kind of like get to work on a list of people that we can invite to attend the meetings for the public involvement aspect that I guess we're talking about now.
Gerald or Patty or Fred, in your experience with other municipalities, do they ever invite in associations such as the realtors or accountants or somebody to talk? I mean, you guys understand the tax law, so we probably don't need to talk to anyone outside of that, but just other business leaders, or is it mostly people, where home rule commissions are interviewing city leaders?
Individual business groups or people that work with the city and the city has an impact on, not so much in the study phase because you're studying the government itself.
Right, good point.
But if there is a problem that a structural change could address, whether it's, I don't see one now, we're in the study, yeah. But municipal associations, sure, that's a different animal.
So like after we have if we're doing a home rule study, a home rule charter, maybe perhaps after the study, we could get some additional input.
Yeah, I think you need to know a level of knowledge to ask a question that gets you a useful answer. People will line up to tell you their point of view all day long.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to have the knowledge to filter out what is self-serving and what is public serving.
I would further just add, the business community is a key element of the city. And certainly you want to get input from citizenry, but you should also look at the business community and like the local chamber and other business organizations to talk with about how they view city government working today, whether they are experiencing any problems with it as it exists today. I think that would be a valid use of the commission's time.
And with the understanding you understood what they were discussing could be addressed or not addressed. So next month, maybe not, down the road, yeah.
That's probably more in the work plan into the early fall months, not the next 2 months.
I just wanted to say that I think what Ms. Bird was getting at was that the engagement of the public is important. And I was thinking about what the mayor said when we had the first meeting where she said, I'll put our resources at your disposal. They have a communications team. I'm sure that they can make sure that our events are broadcast. They can help us, reserve spaces. They can, produce little fun graphics so people, pay attention to what's going on. And I just have confidence that that connection can be made and the public can be made aware.
Is there any, I'm not sure if there's any additional, Mr. Dasher?
Yeah, so on the matter of public involvement, I mean, you have two different sets of data, qualitative and quantitative, and I think that these meetings are great for getting numbers on facts and figures, but I do definitely think we need to hear from a lot of residents as well. Like, one of the most important urban planning texts, The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, is it doesn't have a whole lot of like numerical data in it that shows why or why not something is bad. It does found itself a lot in observation, and therefore, like, I guess you could say not necessarily what someone might constitute as a study, but today, in today's world, that's one of the most well-known and highly regarded texts. I think that it would be great if that at this meeting we could at least establish a framework of how and putting out some sort of request to facilities in the public that we are looking for places to, not necessarily all of us, but some of us meeting so that we can start to engage the public more directly about some of their concerns, some of the things they might look forward to through a new form of government and so on.
And again, I think we're jumping ahead to item 8, which I think specifically would discuss how do we want to proceed, is item 8 on the agenda. I would like to get to item 8, so I'd like to move on from this.
Number 8,
Yeah.
are we not on discussion regarding the public relations and public
Involvement, but I think we've gotten into more of how are we moving forward? Are we planning more meetings, or who are we inviting? Which really comes down to planning our next steps.
If I may, Mr. Adams, I think there was a revised agenda that added public comment. You might be off by one number.
Oh, okay.
So I think add one to everything and you'll be right on track.
So we're in number 7 right now.
That's right.
And we're talking about number 9.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, my printer wasn't working, so it's handwritten.
Yeah, I copy.
Yes.
I would just, I think, reinforce what Tony and Darlene are saying, is that public engagement is really important, and how we get there. And the type of involvement is also really important. So I would just like to say that I took your comment that we need to study and know the questions that we want to ask, or at least have more information before we, obviously we want the public to tell us what they think at any time, but I do think that there needs to be some kind of coordinated effort, and I'm going to put him on the spot a little bit. Stephen is here. This was not planned, but one of the things I want to talk about at some point is to have Dr. Medvik, I can't remember. He's a professor at F&M, and I'm not going to get it all right, but he has organized something called deliberative forums that brings the community together and gives them sort of a briefing, and then lets them deliberate, and then we listen and hear what they have to say and use that information to inform our own decisions. I think we're way too early for something like that, but at some point I was going to ask the commission to invite him to present to us so that we can understand what that is. But so I would just like to reinforce, I agree that the public involvement is really important. Just don't know if we're ready to have something organized and official, but for sure we want people to talk to us.
Any other comments? Moving on. The next item is discussion of the process, and I like the word, the process for establishing a budget. The city has offered to, I assume within reason, support financially what we will need to do. Now, I will defer to anybody on this process because I have no knowledge of how to establish a budget. So, Mr. Hamburger, you seem to, so I will.
A little. I'll work a little bit here with the Economy League. You have an obligation under the Act to actually produce a budget for the expenses that you anticipate spending. Ultimately, where that money comes from is always a challenge. One of the things that There is a grant that is currently open with DCD to fund this type of work. The city is in the process of submitting a grant application, and we're using estimated costs. The city will be required, if it gets that grant, to have a 50-50 match. So in other words, if your total budgeted expenses were going to be around $130,000, they granted us $130,000, we'd have to pay, they would be granting us essentially $65,000, and we'd have to match the remaining $65,000. The things that go into your budget, and again, I think this is really, the topic here is not to set it tonight, but to tell you that it's something you're going to have to think about and plan for. But the types of expenses that, I did a little homework with the help of Jerry and Fred and Patty in terms of what other, and every municipality is going to be a little different because of what they can offer. But you're already incurring, for example, the expense of the Economy League. So we know what that would amount to over the course of Phase 1, which you've already retained them for. We also know what it would amount to if you retained them for Phase 2, which was the assistance in drafting the charter. Presumptively, we're going to have significant printing costs because ultimately your final report you're going to want distributed to the public, and it's going to and other documents as you move forward. You're going to have advertising costs. We've already incurred some of those to advertise this meeting. As you have discussed, you're most likely going to be having additional meetings. That's expected, anticipated, but you'll need to be paying for advertising for those. So that has to actually occur under the Sunshine Act, as we've discussed. Copying. We've already incurred some expense for you here to give you emails, computer access. There's expense associated with that. If you choose to do, so you're going to want website work. Now that's something, again, where we're providing a match can be in kind. So for example, the city's website and the services the city provides. The city has volunteered my time. So if you didn't have me, you would have legal services because you're going to have legal questions. So again, that's part of the budget. The city has provided you with clerical services in the form of Mr. Harris. So his time, if you didn't have him, would one of you be willing to do all the work that he's doing in between the meetings? Those are all things that are a legitimate part of the budget that you can produce. As we work a little bit on the grant, we're putting in obviously numbers just in order to process it. We'll be able to revise that budget as you guys do, but we want to get in with DCD on the grant because quite frankly, it's a first come, first serve in that grant process. So we're working on that, and by next month's meeting, I'll be prepared to share with you the work that we've done and in advance to give you ideas of what we anticipate as reasonable expenses. But of course, you may change that. Those expenses may change. You may say, hey, you're way off on advertising because we're going to have way more meetings than you're thinking about for that number. Or we may want additional things that we haven't thought of. Another area of service that we know you're going to probably want at some point, particularly if you go forward with drafting a new charter, is some GIS services. Again, those are services that the city can provide to some extent in kind, which would be part of our match to you, but it's about getting the total dollars. Have I kind of covered that?
Yeah.
Could we just task PEL to develop a draft budget for us with the expense information from the city and their general knowledge of these activities? And then we can work it
Would that
out.
be a reasonable request?
Yeah, it's your budget, we're your staff.
Is there any objection to that? Not hearing any, I would say, please, if that would be great. And you'd be working with Mr. Hanwerger on what they're already,
Yeah,
the plan is.
yeah, we'll need, what the city has to provide.
Mr. Chair, I got a
Yes.
question.
Mr. Dasher.
So, Mr. Hanwerger, do you know when the final budget needs to be submitted by, from today's meeting?
I'll defer to Mr. Cross, but there's, to my knowledge, there's no timeline built into the act itself.
No.
It just requires you to do it. Again, it's, to use an analogy I gave you guys in previous time, a lot of this statute is to put you guys in the rowboat in the middle of an ocean without a ton of direction. This is one of them. You're told you have to row the boat. They really haven't told you where
Okay.
or when, but you do have to do it at some point.
I think the important element is having it done and getting the grant submitted.
Sure.
Right, and that's key, because the budget is going to form the basis for the grant.
And so we were talking about like cities in-kind contribution to the budget, for example. So we just had a discussion about like public involvement. I feel like we should maybe I know that we're a little far off from engaging the public, but for the sake of numbers, we should get ahead of the game and put out like a request for, I don't know that request for proposals is the right term to use, but a request for venues to say like, hey, I'm willing to contribute this space for these dates to the Home Rule Study Commission for the purpose of engaging the public, and I would typically, and if they so choose, stating I would value the use of this space at X dollars, but I'm willing to contribute it in kind. I think like that could be valuable information for constructing a budget and creating that sort of match. Because if there are community spaces around the city that, let's say it costs $500 to operate it, but they're saying, we'll let you use it for a night, that's at least $500 in kind we can account for. I know that there's a lot of planning involved with that, which is why I think it's good to have general outreach to businesses who might be willing, businesses or institutions that might be willing to contribute their facilities.
So can I ask maybe Mr. Cross or any of you, is that common? Is that common, or is that a common practice that commission would go out into the community, into different areas, and request use of spaces for this kind of?
I have seen it, some commissions set up a central location, and that's where they reside. And I've seen some that have a central location and they have a set schedule of outreach. You're in the study phase, so I don't know how much a change of venue increases your understanding. If you go to a charter drafting stage, it might be good to have you in different parts of the city, because you will be drafting a charter in response to citizens, and it's never hurts to have the citizens understand how you got to where you got, because they're going to ultimately make the judgment whether or not your work was satisfactory.
Okay,
But
so, go ahead.
If you have, trying to think, Fred and Patty, how a venue would affect the study part, because you're going to be,
Well, I think as Tony said.
it's okay to put
putting
yourself on the road
priorities
so they
ahead
can
of-
see what you're doing, and, you know, you're asking questions. That never hurts, but is it critical to the study phase? I don't,
Yeah, no, I was really just asking if it was common, if those kind of venues are something that we would do after the study phase, just based on what Tony was,
I think going on the road, and you have an obligation for a public hearing, at
okay,
least one, the more you work is understood.
okay,
Yeah, it's,
thank you.
Mr.
there's a
Sheriff,
certain amount of PR here. You're trying to get the citizens to understand that you have their best interest,
Exactly.
and your best efforts are to improve their government experience.
Mr. Hamworth. What I would note is that I think as part of any proposed budget that Mr. Cross and I would work on, and the one that I've already started working on with the grants team at the city, would include, we don't have to have the details of how much you actually expect to spend. It's about estimates. A budget is an estimate. It's a best guess at the time you're making it, and they're always amendable with the state as you're moving forward. So we will certainly be building into the budget process your desires, as we've heard here this evening, that you have money available to have meetings at outside locations. I don't think it's necessary right now to determine the specific cost of any one particular venue. You're going to have the money and the ability to do that. What process you choose to select those venues will be up to you as we move forward. The one thing I would note is that as you choose venues, you're going to have to pay attention to a few things that Pennsylvania law requires, and that's under the Sunshine Act and the open meetings, and then a couple of other laws, which is there's going to have to be access for the disabled to the facility. You're going to also need to make sure that the facility is reasonably planned to hold the number of people that would show. So you have to, whoever shows has to be able to have access. And then the third thing is a little bit about what we're doing here. Do you have the right facilities in there, and that's part of what would be included in the budget to make sure you have them if you went into a facility that didn't have them. So, for example, microphones for people to be heard. The budget would also include things like if we need translation of documents as we go out to the public. So all of those factors, the budget is going to be broad categories. So you're going to have things like legal expense. You're going to have things like consultant expense. You're going to have things like printing. You're not going to necessarily break it down to the level of line items that we're talking about here. The concept here is that you just have to really kind of plan that you're going to spend this type of money. So I think all of the detail will come. The concept that's really for you here tonight is just to let you know that you do have to do a budget and you're all doing the right thing. You're thinking of the types of things that should be included in it. And I just wanted to make sure we understand the budget really is an estimate. You're not bound to it, right? So if we go over, we have to figure out where to get the money from. And if we're under, that's okay too.
I have one more question.
Yes, Ms. Wood.
Did you say, Barry, that the grant application has been submitted or it's going to be prepared?
No, it's going to be prepared. What we hope to do is we don't need your budget in order to do the grant submission.
Yeah.
We're gonna make a grant submission based on what we believe your budget may or may not look like. We have the ability once we're approved for a grant to amend the actual budget we submitted. So what the city is going to be doing is preparing its best estimate. And I'll be taking back the feedback from tonight. The grants team will be working on submitting the grant because we want to get in early before you're really get to the point of finishing your budget. We firmly believe that we will get a grant from DCED. That budget then will be modified. The budget that we submit for the grant will allow to be modified by your development of the budget you submit to the city. It will simply give us a benchmark of how much money we know we're going to be getting from the state and how much money that we know, whether in kind or in services, that the city will have to match.
I have more of a question for the commission then. Just since we're talking about projected possibilities in forming the grant application, you guys are awesome. In fact, I love the fact that you're so seasoned and you've been doing this for a long time. Like, you guys have been doing this since when? You said the 80s?
Our organization's been involved since the law was passed.
Okay.
Myself, I've been, involved since I've been employed by the Economy League, which is 30 years, but that doesn't mean I had 30
okay.
home rule commissions. I forget how many we have, but it's probably double digits at some point,
So I might be talking a little ridiculous here, but, I'm a pretty young dude. I think I'm the youngest member of the commission here. I would love if we could consider the idea of hiring an intern to work with our staff here so that more young people can gain experience to this process. So maybe they go through this and they decide, I want to pursue a career like the individuals in front of us. I think that this is not just an opportunity for our city, but it's also an opportunity to expose people to different kinds of work. And if I had been given that sort of opportunity when I was a little bit younger, I would have been like, yeah, no, that sounds awesome. Let me get involved in this sort of process. So, like I said, I might be talking a little ridiculous, but I think it'd be interesting to have an intern work with our hired staff.
And I guess I would just ask, I was reading in the book that a lot of universities do work with the commission. Would that be something that's included in the budget, or we would reach out to them in preparing the budget?
So I'll try and answer a little bit for you. So Professor is here, and I apologize to him. I had intended to reach out to him earlier, but we'll talk later. But many universities will volunteer because, quite frankly, if I'm a government professor, and I'm somebody that's been a lawyer for over 30 years, I've never had this opportunity. I didn't have this opportunity as a student. So we study how government works. We study government's existing, but to actually be part of the process. So I believe that you will not have too strong an issue in getting professors from Franklin and Marshall, Millersville, that want their students to be involved and would volunteer their services to assist, because quite frankly, those students might live a lifetime and never have that opportunity. Many of the professors will live a lifetime and never have that opportunity. That's how unique a situation this is. What I will do is take all the feedback I'm hearing tonight. Again, the grant, there's a maximum on the grant. We're going to put it in and leave broad categories in the grant, and ultimately, as you flesh out what you specifically want, we'll fit that into those categories and/or modify the grant accordingly. But the city needs to put the grant application in. That's a separate process from you submitting a budget to the city. And the timing of the way the DCED grant and their enrollment periods with when your election doesn't work for you to have time to really make these kind of coalesce. So we're trying to make sure that we have the funds in place to support everything the commission wants to do. And we'll do what we can to make that work.
Mr. Hamburger, just to jump on that a little bit, I think it's actually awesome that we could potentially involve a lot of different young people in the process. My only request is that we do find some way to compensate the young people regardless, because I'm speaking as someone who like literally just got their second degree, and when September comes, I saw what I'm going to have to pay, and it's coming out to like close to $500 a month for the student loans. So I think compensation can encourage people who may not otherwise want to get involved in the process, but also provide some at least minor relief to individuals with the high cost of education. So that's all I'm really saying.
Yeah.
We can provide some sort of funds to
Well,
those.
I certainly understand that every item on the budget will ultimately be a decision of the entire body here of the commission.
Yeah.
And then again, the city will have to approve your budget. So there's a series of processes that have to go through. But we're working the steps to get you there. And again, it's a little bit, this is a great meeting. We're getting discussion, and then there are some things that are cart before the horse. And I think that's wonderful that we want to put the cart before the horse, because that says we're really anxious to do our job. But again, I think that's a cart before the horse. Like, we'll include the categories, and then if this commission agrees as a body that fees for an internship should be included. Part of this is once we have the grant, we're going to know what, we fiscally have. That can help shape some of the decisions you make. So, at this point, I've noted that that's an area of possibility, and we'll certainly try and make sure that the categories in our request to the state for funding are sufficient, that could be included if the commission wishes.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. I'd like to move on. Anytime, as long as the public is still here, that's always a good sign.
Can I ask two questions about the discussion? Just really quick.
It's a little off, but it's okay with me, sure.
Okay. For the DCD grant, did you say when there would be a time the city expects to submit that grant application?
We're working on it currently. I've not committed to a time. I don't have my grants team here yet.
Okay, got it, thanks. And for the economy league, the draft budget, is that expected, or would you hope you want to present that at the next meeting, or?
Yeah.
The budget, yeah.
It's part of the work plan that hasn't been discussed yet. But yeah, and there's not a deadline, so what we can get done, we get done.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? We move on to plan what we should be doing next. Okay, let's move on to item 9, now that I have my numbering correctly. Next steps, couple of items. I would look at this as, what should we be doing until our next meeting? Should we be discussing the idea of forming subcommittees? There's been some questions about whether to have or not have subcommittees, and just the overall timeline. So I'd actually like to look at this, to handle the issue of committees first.
Can I?
And yes, Mr. Feldman.
All right. So I'm looking at the work plan that PEL developed. Is it right? You guys?
Yes.
Okay. And if you look at the section for July through August, What's said is study existing state law and their impact on municipalities, study city current structure under third-class city code, interviews city officials, city department heads, and consider strengths and weakness of current city structure, governance structure. I assume that's what you mean. What did you have in mind about how that would work? And then I think once we have a sense, I like this. I think this is very helpful, and I'm appreciative for it. And so, what does it mean to study existing state law and impact on municipalities, for example? Like, not literally what is that, because I know what that is, but like, what'd you have in mind?
What homework are you giving us?
We basically have given you a number of documents to review right
Okay.
now, your homework assignment, if you will. And that's what those first two items would relate to, reviewing the documents that you have been provided. We may even, based on discussion here tonight, supplement that with additional document or two from some of the questions that have come up. But for instance, on the taxation issue, we can supplement that with, information, the taxation manual that was discussed. So those are the first two items. It's basically going to be a lot of reading, reviewing, then moving to the interview items.
Well, can I just, one comment? I would say if you haven't, to my fellow commissioners, if you haven't read it yet, I made sure each of you got a copy of it's not 1965 anymore. So if you haven't read it, please do read. It's not Hemingway, but it is a good read. And it's, I will say it's an eye-opener. It really puts a whole lot of what we're trying to accomplish, what we should, how we're proceeding. It puts it into a easy way to look at it. So like I said, if you haven't read it yet, please do that. And I would hope that for any member of the public, it should be available. We should be able to.
It's on our website.
It's on the PEL website.
It's on the
So
Pennsylvania Municipal.
again, all right. So now we'll get back to you now. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
That's fine.
relating to two of the homework assignments that I know you were sent, and I just want to give a little clarification so you don't overread. So the optional charter law, there are some general sections in it, but the form of government that the city of Lancaster it takes under that optional charter law is the Council Mayor Plan A. So you'll see a section, that's the primary section of our structure under the optional charter law. I did want to take a moment to just explain to you how that and the third-class city code relate, because without it, you will really not understand how the structure works. So there are things in the optional charter law that contradict or are different than what are in the third-class city code. To the extent that the optional charter law contradicts or changes a term of the third-class city code, the optional charter law will apply. What the optional charter law doesn't address, the third-class city code applies. It's a tricky concept. What I would say to you as you start your homework assignment is, in general, the third-class city code almost applies across the board. There are a few areas where it is substantially changed by the optional charter law. One of those being issues of it's the breakdown of legislative versus executive authority. That's one of the big areas that's changed. So, like, you will see references throughout the third-class city code that council approves X, Y, or Z, and yet the optional charter law says that it's basically the mayor and the administration are charged with enforcing and administering things. So that's where there gets to be some conflict, but that's the single biggest difference. There's some changes in terms of what penalties can or can't be included in ordinances, some advertising types of things, some provisions relating to veto and how ordinances are adopted that are different in the optional charter law and govern. But the general, as you walk through the third-class city code, most of those provisions that talk about the requirements for police bureau, fire bureau, I think there's 137 chapters, basically it goes through chapter 137 in the optional charter law. In the third-class city code, most of those provisions are going to apply, and a general reading of that really will give you a pretty good understanding of the obligations of city government and the law under which we currently execute those, in terms of we being the city.
So can I get back to the question I was on, which was essentially, how do we take these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things and move them into activities that we conduct before our, I don't know about before our next meeting, but.
I was going to suggest, when I was looking at the July through August activities, I see 3 meetings. So the study, the first 2, study existing, study analyze, like you're giving us homework, then we would have a meeting where we've done our homework and we ask you a bunch of questions. And then we have another meeting where we interview this, theoretically, we are more informed. And we have another meeting where we interview people.
City, yes.
Right, and then we have more information, and perhaps you give us additional homework at that time, I'm not sure, perhaps, and then we have a third meeting where we're discussing strengths and weaknesses of the current city structure.
I think that's a good assessment of the process that
Right.
we laid out here. We suggested that you follow. You know, you need to determine how you're going to do those interviews, both elected and appointed officials, whether you bring them in and have them before the entire commission, one option, but you're going to do those interviews. And then at the end of that process, you're going to, you know, from everything all the knowledge that you've gained at that point, you know, talk about, okay, what is working? What are the strengths here? What are the weaknesses? What are the deficiencies that exist? That'll allow you to, you know, to move to the next step.
And-
So I think you need to determine, you know, kind of the meeting schedule, and then to the chair's comment about if you're going to break into committees at all and do any of the work in committees, or do it as a committee of the whole.
One comment, I'm a little concerned about adding meetings, the additional meetings, just from scheduling aspects at this point for July. To say adding meetings in July, I'm only speaking for my own schedule. I teach Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights. So this is an exception for me, but so we have to deal with all of our schedules as well if you're adding meetings at this time. Mr. Feldman.
I just wanted to say that I liked your suggestion. I'm fine with us adding the meetings. If we have a quorum, then we can conduct business. And of course, I'd love you to be present, but if not, that's okay too. I trust that you'll do your homework, Professor. And you asked about committees. Yeah, I don't know that we really need to do that. I think we could all just set some dates and do the meeting.
Yeah, I would suggest that I'm sorry. Go ahead, Arnie.
No, Mr. Barber.
Just given the concerns about trying to schedule meetings and the realities of people's schedules, that probably not having committees might be the best bet, so that we can achieve a quorum that is a committee of a whole.
And I was going to say the same thing. I like the idea of setting up our meetings and moving forward. I think it would be good to
Yeah,
start the
before I got
process.
elected, I thought that the subcommittees made sense, but now that I've done this, I'm not sure
No,
that it does, given our
At least
time.
for the first till July, August anyway, so we get an understanding. I think it would be good that the whole commission is studying what we need to and asking questions and meeting with the people that we have, the elected officials, city departments. Can I make a motion that we try to schedule a meeting at the end of July? We have 3 meetings, you said? Can we look at our calendars and?
I will second the motion of scheduling a second meeting in July.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor for adding an additional meeting in July. Is there discussion?
Yes, I agree with everything you've said, but I just think we can get the scheduling done offline. We don't need to do it
Oh, we
sitting
don't
right
have to do
here.
it today? Okay.
And I empower the, chair or the vice chair to send out a survey or do whatever needs to be done for us to, that's how I feel about it, that's all.
Okay, there is a motion to table the motion on scheduling committees. Is there a second on the motion to table?
I second that.
Is there any discussion on that? Actually, there's no discussion on a motion to table.
Yep.
Is there,
A motion to schedule meeting.
well, no, in this case, I would just say, I think we can just do a verbal, a vote. All in favor,
Aye.
tabling it?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the motion has been tabled. So right now, we're discussing not planning on creating committees. We will set up, trying to find a common date, hopefully where at least the majority of us can meet for an additional meeting, with the plans being what? What specifically is there a topic,
The topic would be,
interviewing?
study existing state law, study, analyze city current structure, the first two of that, July
Right.
through August, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, I interpreted those as kind of reading on our own. And
Yes.
that the actual meeting would be to interview the city.
Oh, I saw
I
it,
thought it
I saw
was-
this as 3 meetings, so the first 2, we've been given our homework.
And then.
Then the meeting would be, we'd invite our staff to come and we would ask them questions about our homework and
Yeah.
clarify the knowledge we have, perhaps plan what we're going to who we're going to interview,
In the question.
how, whether we're doing it at like this or some other
Yeah.
function, and perhaps,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think what Ms. Rufo is proposing is actually very astute. So again, going back to what the Economy League mentioned is, in order to know what to ask what officials to talk to and what to ask them, understanding the subject matter is exceptionally important. So I think what Ms. Rufo is proposing is adding one additional meeting so that as you review your homework, you can ask the Economy League, if necessary, you could ask me as your solicitor, questions to help you get the information you need so that you can then plan who you want to interview and what you want based on what you
Okay.
know and what you think you need to learn.
Okay.
So I think that's very astute. The one thing I would note on the motion is that if and when it's approved, the chair will need to be working with Mr. Harris also on available dates here. This room is generally fairly heavily booked. That doesn't mean that with proper work, we can't make it happen. Just letting you know, there are some meetings here that won't be able to be moved due to advertising constraints and other things. But that'll be just something that Mr. Harris will work on, and then he and I can work on whatever advertising and Sunshine Act requirements are necessary to make that happen.
Okay, so we will start at this point. I'm trying to find a common time for us that we can then work with the city on accommodations.
I think the point was just we can figure it out offline, like we can email and figure it out.
Right now.
No, not right now. That's what I'm trying to say, like,
No,
we don't,
our solicitor confirmed that we can determine when our next meeting is by email. and
Right,
then-
if your motion is to authorize the body to send dates when they're available around, that is not a substantive decision that would be constituted deliberation. It needs to come before the body. So I think we can do that without fear of violating the Sunshine Act.
That's fine.
So I think we're in good shape.
So, I actually have a question then. Since we have to navigate getting the meeting here, could we actually be sent a list of dates and basically just respond with like a poll or something?
Yeah, again, I think that's what Ms. Rufo was proposing, that can be
Okay.
worked out with the chair and Mr. Harris to help you facilitate that process. Yeah.
Okay, I was
And it will
panicking.
not be a violation of the Sunshine Act. Again, I don't think we have to go into the specific process that Mr. Harris will follow, but I think he'll figure out a way to get information from all of you about available dates, and we can get something scheduled.
Okay. So Mr. Harris, you will handle that. Thank you. So that, I'm, now that I understand what we're talking about, okay?
I like
Thank you. All right. So we have decided effectively that for the time being, we are not planning on forming subcommittees. We are planning on the next step as the next meeting. I'm not sure if there's anything additional we should be adding into that at this point. Yes.
I was just going to say, I think you do need to make a motion to add the meeting
Oh, okay. So-
and have that approved by the commission. That would be commission business.
Thank you. So is there a motion?
wait. Sorry, why do we need a motion?
Was there a motion made to add an additional meeting?
No, There was, we pulled it off, we pulled it.
Yeah, but you just need to make the motion to authorize adding the meeting. The body has to approve that activity.
We can't do a meeting without a motion.
No, you cannot.
I make a motion that dependent on the results of a poll sent out by Mr. Harris giving dates of availability for City Hall, we have another meeting for the month of July.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, and while normally the chair repeats the motion, I'm not going to repeat that motion. Effectively, it's saying there's a motion on the floor to pending availability, schedule an additional meeting in July. Is there any further debate?
Could we set all 3 meetings? We said we're going to have 3 meetings from July and August. Can we set all 3 so that it can be put out there? Or we just
Yes,
want to
Ms.
make a
Ruffo.
motion to do one and then come back and make a motion to do the second? Can you send us the dates and we set the next 3 meetings for July and August? We all agreed there's 3.
We already have at least our second meeting already scheduled on August 3rd. So so if we add one here in the end of July, we already have one scheduled for August 3rd,
Then we need one more.
then we'll need one more. But I would suggest we could agree on that at the August.
Okay, no problem.
We could still poll it in the same poll and then approve the meeting at another meeting.
I'd just like to mention that I'd encourage us to revisit our bylaws where it says we have a majority vote to do a meeting and just let the chair set dates for meetings so we don't have to keep doing this.
Well, the chair would officially call the meeting with a majority vote. Majority vote requires a motion.
I'm just saying, in the future, it says in the bylaws, by a majority vote, a meeting gets called. Let's just find a way to get around that so we can move this on in the future, not
Okay.
tonight.
Any further discussion? Okay, I call the question. Mr. Harris, would you poll the commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barber,
Yes.
Ms. Byrd,
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Dastra,
Yes.
Mr. Feldman,
Aye.
Mr. McGround,
Aye.
Ms. Ruffo,
Aye.
Chairman Adams.
Yes. Okay, so in the opinion of the chair, the motion passes. We will get a range for an additional meeting and with all the aspects that have to be, obviously including PEL, with their schedule as well. So, thank you. Is there any other discussion on item 9? Okay, item 10. Are there any other matters for the good of the commission? Officially, public comment is at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, my public comments and observation of tonight's meeting, comments that I'd like to add. Am I allowed to publicly?
With-
my comments?
I'll ask for an opinion of the parliamentarian. Are we allowed to add an additional public comment at this time?
At the pleasure of the board, you can, yes.
If there's not any objection from the commission.
No objections.
Without objection, we open the floor. If you could provide us with your name and your
Sure.
street.
My name is Linda Schreiner. I live on Southwest End Avenue in the city of Lancaster. Just observation. I didn't want to be screaming, as I've noticed when some people get close to the microphone, it sounds like you're screaming. But I know it's a learning curve for a lot of us. So I work in an entity that I'm in the public eye all the time, dealing with exactly what you are dealing with right now, and I applaud you for the undertaking you're going through. But I remind you that you are an elected official, and as an elected official, you need to remain as transparent as possible in the process. Sounds like your sunshine law lessons last month were pretty educational, and that's some of the questions I have. You've noted that this meeting is being live streamed. I'd like to know, I had to go dig for the agenda online, which I was successful in achieving, and it was the numbered right version. Where is the link online for live streaming for the people who are at home, who would like to be able to watch this, who can't get here after work? We get beat up where I work now all the time when it's they want evening, but not everyone can get here at the time. So where is that live stream link?
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. Follow City of Lancaster YouTube page.
Okay,
You'll be golden.
okay. Maybe that could be put at the top of your agenda where that link is, so that if someone's pulling down the agenda, they know where the link is. I would encourage a website development for this project. This project is so important to the public, and if you want the public support and the buy-in, you need to give them a website where they can find all these documents you've been talking about, all the suggestions and links, easily accessible to them to get to it, so that they can come with intelligent questions for you, and so they can become educated. You're going to need to get to the point of making a recommendation. I've heard numerous times tonight, which is going to require a vote from the public. If you want public support and you want buy-in, you need to educate the public better than has occurred now. I've read all the articles in the newspaper. I've watched, my husband's diligent in reading the paper and always sticking things in front of me. Read this, tell me what it means. You need to educate the people as much as you can in this process. So, the agenda, Sunshine Law requires, I believe, 24 hours or 48 hours in advance of a meeting to be publicly posted so that you know what's going to be on the agenda. Might I suggest all the things you voted on tonight, the bylaws and things like that, be attachments to the agenda so the public, if they have any comment or thought, they have the opportunity to be prepared for the meeting, just like you had the opportunity to be prepared for the meeting. And it again, increases transparency. It gets the public supporting what you're doing, and that's what you want in this whole process. You want them to be your cheerleaders so that whatever decision you make, you've got their support out of the gate. So I'd ask for things like the deck that was presented today from your consultant to be out there on that website or links or whatever built in so we can get to it. Maybe a public email address being established for the project. You've asked, I'm going to butcher your last name, I'm sorry, Rufo, to be your public liaison to the press, but maybe a public email address built on that website so that if people have input, that they can go there and be able to get a response, and one person monitors that speaks as a voice. If I have a right to know request, who do I submit that right to know request to right now? I'm going to assume it's going to be the solicitor, but. It's going to be the City of Lancaster. Okay. But that's information that could be, transcended here for the commission so everyone's aware of it. So again, I would just encourage that transparency as much as possible. I know you guys are new at this and this is an infancy and it's only the second meeting you've had and you're still organizing. But the more you can get that and the ideas of the public meetings, they're great. They're difficult to organize. I do that in the project I'm working on right now. You just need to be as transparent as possible. When you think you've got it right, somebody's going to tell you got it wrong, but you can do this. So thank you very much for everything you're doing for us.
Thanks for that.
Thank you for your comments.
For comments.
Barry, I have a question for you. Can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
So Linda mentioned these documents that we've all looked at today. It's my understanding that our minutes don't get posted until we approve them at the following meeting, right? Is it possible to post all the documents we looked at on the city's current home rule page?
So in fact, your bylaws provide that you're going to be posting within 10 days everything except for the minutes, which will be a month delayed each time. So that's actually part of the bylaws, is that everything that was here tonight will. Now I know let me finish, please. The request here is about, posting things in advance of a meeting. That's a choice the commission can certainly make. There are, pluses and minuses to that. In terms of if documents are not, if the homework assignment's easy, if there's documents that are being drafted, it limits the ability to get things changed, but that's, again, the commission's discretion. You can certainly post those on the website. There's no issue with that when you post the agenda. I would say that in many cases, posting links is going to be the way to do it. I wouldn't be recommending posting the entire third-class city code, the entire optional charter law, and reposting, again, the budget that's already on the city's website. But those types of things can certainly be accomplished, and Mr. Harris can certainly work with the chair before the next meeting to see what can be posted. And obviously, while 24 hours is the requirement, the goal of Mr. Harris is always to try and post things on the website almost a week in advance, which is, he doesn't always succeed, not because of his fault, but because of work getting things together, but that's typically the goal.
I have a question, Barry.
Sure.
The documents that you said could not be posted, what is the reason that they couldn't be posted if it's
The minutes aren't
not the
actually
minutes,
official
the other
record.
documents?
That's the only document that can't be posted.
The other documents?
The other documents, I'm just talking about, like trying to get photocopies of things. There may be things that are just links that aren't reasonable to photocopy, et cetera. If links are easy, it can be done whatever you want. Again, it's about building what's the most convenient process. So sometimes, even with, for example, an optional charter law or the third-class city code, the copy that I would download doesn't necessarily have all of the amendments that might have been made by the legislature. So I'm not saying we won't try to post everything. I'm saying there may be times where posting the actual document may require additional work to give people information. It's about giving as much information as possible, Ms. Cook. I'm not saying we can't. I'm saying you're looking at me quizzically, and I'm telling you that there are probably...
Only because you said that we cannot post one of those documents.
No, I didn't
The
say
city
that we
code.
can't. I didn't say that we can't. I said that we might not post in each case. I didn't say can't, ma'am. I did not say can't.
I guess what I'm hearing is there's a difference between posting and providing a link to something.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's, I think, what you're working on with staff that's creating it, is there may be times where it's advantageous to actually post the document. There may be times where it's advantageous to post links because it gives you actually more information. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to limit the ability. I'm trying to say, keep your options open to be as transparent as you can. And sometimes actually posting is less transparent than a link. And I say that because if you go and download a copy of the third-class city code, you are not getting actually everything that is part of the third-class city code right now, because there were statutes that have been adopted, amending it, that haven't been codified. So again, that's highly technical. I'm not trying to limit. I'm trying to actually work with you to make it as transparent as you absolutely can.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Hamburger. I think I'm gonna put on my hat as Mr. Livestream right now. So I remember, starting to get involved in just government in general. One of the rebuttals I would often get to my ideas was, well, you don't know the third-class city code. You didn't read the third-class city code. And I think just the general concern was that we're not gonna connect people to those resources, which I know is not the case. It just wasn't communicated clearly. And I think we're all on the same page that I think the goal is to make sure the public has connection as much as possible to as many resources, even if they're overwhelming resources. I think, because if I hadn't taken the initiative myself, like we were talking about amendments to the third-class city code earlier. When I first was told to read the third-class city code, it turns out I was reading the old version. And then I think it was Mr. Harris that at one point had connected me with the proper resource, and I was able to educate myself and get informed on how third-class city code operated, as well as the optional charter law. All that aside, because I think what that speaks to is just when we do the website, we'll have to structure some big permanent links of resources as opposed to reposting that every meeting. I think that's what you were saying, is we don't have to post the third-class city code every meeting, but I think Ms. Cook's point was that we should be definitely connecting residents through the website to that resource.
And absolutely, everything we can post. The only thing we can't post is within the 10 days is the minutes, right? So the minutes from tonight's meeting can't be posted within 10 days of today's meeting.
And
that's where my
Understood.
can't was. Those have to wait. Those are a month delayed. So those minutes don't become minutes that are records until after your next meeting when they're approved. So that's the item that can't be posted.
We understood that.
Yeah, that was the only can't that I was getting at.
All my ramble aside, I do have a question, Mr. Hamburger. So, is it permissible for the public to read a draft of the minutes? Because especially with the fact that we have live streaming, something I personally have always had in my mind is that the idea that the public could actually make the point hey, I don't feel like the minutes accurately represent the conversation. It doesn't mean we have to take action. But
So the answer, I think, is yes, and it's actually what's anticipated about what we talked about earlier. So
okay.
remember, the posting of 10 days after is documents that came before you tonight, correspondence that might have come to the commission that wasn't discussed. Those things should all be posted under your bylaws within 10 days after tonight's meeting. In advance of your next meeting, we will be posting on the website your agenda. The request that I've heard tonight is that we also post the documents that might be referenced in that agenda for consideration, including, for example, the minutes. So the draft of the minutes would then be posted as one of the same documents that you're seeing. So yes,
Okay.
it's about timing.
Yeah, I think that'd be wonderful. I think it'll help the public, and honestly, that might even help me, because part of the reason I didn't read the bylaws before the meeting was that we had been sent a few emails in a chain, and I didn't see that there was a email with the bylaw attachment in there, so that's my bad, but I think just the public being able to read what we're seeing before we come to the meeting is going to be beneficial to everybody.
Okay. Any other additional matters? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Without objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
I know.
Apparently they turn off the HVAC.
Seems that way, right?
Yeah, there's no.
It's not gonna be.
The building's trying to tell us something.
We'll just make sure certain items are in there.
Right. All right, well, congratulations, I'm glad you're out on your bike, how can you do that now?
Around town, just take a city bike.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a while till I'm at my level.
And you're,
Tell me what charter it is.
you said your primary road bike.
Actually, the frame is good.
Okay.
I just